This video is brought to you by my new album entitled Dougal's Treats. It's full of hummable melodies, bluesy riffs and the occasional bit of virtuoso flashy stuff as well. If you enjoy bluesy rock guitar with memorable tunes and solos that wail like a banshee, then check out the links in the description. The premium version includes all of the tabs for each tune, videos and jam tracks as well. Thanks for listening. Now on with the show. Hello chaps, welcome once again to John Robson Guitar Tuition. As always, I do hope you're well. Here's a guitar solo for you, and then we're going to have a chat about it. So, yes, as you could probably tell there, I was using our old friend, the pentatonic scale in that position there, just kind of noodling around in the key of E minor. Now, as you could probably tell, that solo stopped kind of in the middle of something, so let's hear where it went next. You notice any similarities there? The more observant amongst you might have spotted something. Basically, that was a much happier, more cheerful, more uplifting, more kind of major key solo, wasn't it? But you may have noticed that it was exactly the same performance as the first E minor solo. I was exploiting something that is, well documented and I speak about all the time. What I want to talk about today is how I discovered the phenomenon of the minor and the relative major, because it is massively important. Just to be clear there, that wasn't me playing the same solo twice. That was the same performance, and I just kind of switched out the backing track underneath it from an E minor backing track to a G major backing track. And, the solo sounded really rather different with the different surroundings, the different context that it was placed in. So here's a little bit of information on how all of this sort of stuff revealed itself to me when I was a young wee whippersnapper of a guitar player.
Here is the explanation.
Right, I suppose, like many people who play the guitar, interested in playing a little bit of bluesy, rocky, lead kind of stuff, as I was in my formative years, the first pattern that you kind of stumble across is this one. Let's put it up on screen. There it is there. Our old friend, the pentatonic scale. I didn't know it was called a pentatonic scale at the time. I just knew that it was, it contained the notes I needed to play Johnny Kidd and the Pirates, shaking all over. I know that, or I knew that it contained the notes I needed to play this. I also knew that it contained the notes needed to play this. You don't get many rock stars coming from Middlesbrough, my hometown, but everybody knew Paul Rodgers in Free and Bad Company was a local boy, so it was kind of almost a local bylaw that you had to learn to play that riff at some point. So yeah, I associated this group of notes here that you can see on screen with anything and everything that was in E minor. And, I remember in the school music room on a lunchtime, just persuading somebody to sit and strum like E minor to D or E minor to B minor or something, and I would just happily noodle away over the top of that on the awful nylon string guitars that were on the rack in the music room. Anyway, as I say, E minor is very much, what I thought of that scale as, and you can see why, because lurking within the notes of that scale pattern are the notes of an E minor chord. But I also began to notice, and I can't remember which came first, but there were two occasions. One, Adam and the Ants were kind of big in the charts at the time that I was doing all of this, and he had a single out. I think was it called Goody Two Shoes, where you could play the main lick from that on this pattern here. But that doesn't have a very E minor sound to it. It's got more of a G major sound. And then another time, it was around about the same time, I was just kind of idly noodling away. And when you get that moment where something familiar just sort of tumbles out of your fingers. And I ended up doing this. Again, more of a G major kind of sound to it. You can hear it there. It just sounds at home with G major. And again, unsurprisingly, that's because also lurking within the notes of that pattern, there is a G major chord. So it made sense to me that, these E minor notes, let's put them up again. There they are. These E minor notes, let's put the E minor chord back on, work equally well in G major because both chord shapes are contained within that set of notes. I still didn't know at the time it was called a pentatonic scale. And then another revelation hit me. At some point I came across a copy of Live and Dangerous by Thin Lizzy, and you hear this riff. And it struck me that, okay, well, that's just basically this shape, but moved up 2 frets. So it's at the 2nd fret. And I began to wonder, I just need to cycle through these to get rid of that. I began to wonder if E minor and G major are linked in some way, if I move that E minor up 2 frets, like that, that's now become E, F, F sharp minor. Well, does the sort of link to major chord also move up 2 frets? So that would be G, G sharp, A. And it seems that it did, because that Thin Lizzy tune is in the key of A. It's got a very strong A major tonality. Well, A flat because they're tuned down, but, I think my tape speed must have been a bit faster or whatever. Or anyway, I didn't really, I can't remember if I remembered the sort of drop tuning thing that Thin Lizzy did, but I certainly knew that A major and what I now thought of as the F sharp minor lead guitar notes were linked in the same way as the E minor and the G major notes. And I remember asking my music teacher about that, Mr. Coffey, wonder whatever it became of him, and he said yes. He says what you've discovered is the minor and relative major, or major and relative minor, and he says it's something that you'll find everywhere in music. Okay, major chords have relative minor chords. Minor chords have relative major chords. Major keys have relative minor keys. Minor keys have relative major keys. Minor scales have relative major scales, and vice versa. And he was the one, I think, that explained to me that this was called a pentatonic scale. And he said, basically, if you use that to play in E minor, you can do exactly the same thing in the key of G major, and it'll work. You're getting 2 scales for the price of 1. And that just seemed like such an incredible thing for me. You could do 2 things with the 1 scale and make it sound completely different depending upon which key you're in. And that's decided by what the chord's doing in the background. And he did this little demonstration where he sat at the piano, because this was just like hanging out in the school music room on a lunchtime, and he would kind of sit there, typical school teacher, elbow patches on his sleeves, and a cup of one of those 70s see-through smoked glass coffee mugs, sipping his coffee. And he would sit there at the piano, and a bunch of us would kind of just jam along with what he was doing, or he would allow us to do that. And it was during one of those sessions that he got me kind of doing all of the all that sort of stuff, just pootling around inside that little scale box. And he would play sad, somber E minor kind of accompaniments behind it, and then he would just switch to kind of playing upbeat, happy, joyful G major accompaniments behind it, and it made me sound different even though I wasn't doing anything different. And that was just like magic for me. That was something akin to sawing the lady in half, or pulling a rabbit from a hat. It was mind-blowing. And because of that, it seemed significant. So what I then resolved to do was make a mental note to make sure I knew what the relative major to any minor was, and what the relative minor to any major was. And over the years, it's something that has cropped up again and again and again. You only have to scratch very thinly at the surface of any aspect of, I don't want to call it music theory, I'm going to call it understanding what's going on in music. I think that's a better way to think of it. You only have to scratch very lightly at the surface of that to see that minor relative major relationship occurring in some guise or other. So, yeah, that was a big discovery for me. And it's one of those bits of knowledge that it doesn't so much solve problems, it just prevents the problem from being a problem in the first place. It just dissolves whatever roadblock you might be encountering if you've got that piece of knowledge. So my advice is make sure you know exactly what the relative minor of any major chord is, or the relative major of any minor chord. It will, I promise you, come in useful. So there you go. Now we know what to do. Go away and have some fun with it. So what you can now do is, if you go back and look at last week's video where I spoke about how you can, figure out where all of the different iterations of that pentatonic scale are along the length of the neck. It's a video, I think, called Why It's Good to Break Strings. I'll put a link to that in the description below this one. Go and check that out, and then you can map up that pentatonic scale, or any pentatonic scale, along the length of the whole neck, and you've got 2 scales for the price of 1. And it is a really good solid foundation and underpinning for everything else that you're ever going to need to know in terms of scales and stuff. I tend to think, well, a pentatonic scale has 5 notes in it, and a major scale and all of its associated modes have 7 notes in it, in them. So what I tend to think of the pentatonic as being 5/7 of every other scale I'm going to need. So you get that pentatonic underpinning, and you can make light work of learning everything else. If you, it's about working smarter, not necessarily harder. Anyway, I'll put a link to that video down in the description, and as always, there's a full tab for that split personality solo that we heard at the top of the video in both Guitar Pro and PDF formats, along with the E minor to G major jam track that I was playing over. Full tab in Guitar Pro and PDF, the the clip of me playing the solo, jam track, that explanation you've just seen, all the usual stuff basically. It's all up on my Patreon page. There's the address, link in the description. As I'm sure you know by now, $3 or about £3 a month gets you access to all of this additional stuff that goes along with these YouTube videos, all the tabs and jam tracks and resources and goodies and everything. It's all up there for about £3 a month or $3 a month. And a massive thank you to everyone who supports me in that, or any of the other ways, all of which are downstairs in the description. And that is pretty much it for today, folks. Hope you've enjoyed the video and found it useful and informative and possibly even entertaining in some small way. And if that's the case, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you haven't already done so. And why not drop me a like as well while you're at it. And don't forget the live stream, of course, every Friday, 5 PM UK time. We just have a beer and a chat, basically. It's a chilled out little way to kick off the weekend. And I'd love to see you there if you can make it. But for now, I'll bid you all a good day and say thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your time. Look after yourselves, folks. Stay well, stay safe, and above all, stay sane. Bye for now.